Hello, my name is Tobias Lock. I'm a senior lecturer in European law at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm co-director of the Europa Institute there. My topic today is human rights and Brexit. So what does Brexit mean for human rights? Now, in order to be able to approach this topic properly, we need to know that there are basically two tracks of human rights protection in the UK. On the one hand, we've got the Human Rights Act, which is very famous, and the Human Rights Act incorporates the European Convention on Human Rights into British law. The European Convention on Human Rights has nothing to do with the European Union, despite the name. It is a European instrument, but it comes out of the Council of Europe, which is an organisation that is different from the European Union, and therefore the European Convention on Human Rights, and with it the Human Rights Act, will not be affected by Brexit, and the UK will remain bound by the Convention, and the Human Rights Act will not be changed, or will not have to be changed because of Brexit. The other track of human rights protection that we have is the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and that is an EU instrument. It's been in force since 2009 with the Lisbon Treaty. And the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights protects, well, most of the rights, or all of the rights really, protected by the European Convention on Human Rights, plus quite a number of rights more than that. The Charter only applies where an EU member state, that is the UK, acts within the scope of EU law. That is where it is implementing its European Union law obligations. So the Charter is more limited in its scope. It doesn't apply to all cases. There has to be some sort of a link to European Union law. Say you've got a person who has moved from another member state to the UK, is working here under European Union rules, and they are now supposed to be expelled from the UK, they can invoke the Charter. If, by contrast, you have a person who has moved to the UK from a third country, say from Canada, and they are now supposed to be expelled from the UK, they cannot invoke the Charter. They have to rely on the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on their own. Now, why do we have these two tracks of fundamental rights protection? It doesn't seem to make much sense. Now, there are two main differences between the Charter, on the one hand, the EU instrument, and the Human Rights Act, which transposes the European Convention, on the other. The first difference is that the Charter, as I already said, protects more rights. It protects certain rights that are not contained in the Convention. For instance, a right to data protection. It also protects certain social rights that are not contained in the Convention. On the other hand, the Charter also protects rights more strongly or better than the European Convention and the Human Rights Act can do in the UK legal order. And that is because the Charter has the force of European Union law. It can be used even to rule out the application of acts of Parliament. And that is not normally possible in the UK. It's only possible if there is a conflict with EU law. Now that possibility will get lost with Brexit. It will no longer exist. By contrast, the Human Rights Act cannot be used to kick out an act of Parliament, to declare it inapplicable in a certain case. The best thing I can get out of the Human Rights Act is a so-called declaration of incompatibility. That is, a court will say in a specific case that, well, a certain act of Parliament does not live up to the standards in the Human Rights Act, and it therefore is incompatible with human rights, but I still lose my case in the end, and will have to wait for Parliament to change the law. So that is the difference. By contrast, the Charter, again, is more limited because it is only applicable where a member state is acting within the scope of EU law. So it has its pluses and it has its minuses. Now with Brexit, the Charter will disappear, and we will only have one source of human rights protection in the UK left, and that will be the Human Rights Act. Now there's this parallel discussion going on at the moment about whether a British Bill of Rights should be introduced instead of the Human Rights Act. And that will be interesting in that the British Bill of Rights can either be used to incorporate some of the rights that will have got lost with the Charter and make human rights protection stronger in the UK, but it can also be used to water down protection. And that the loss of the Charter has opened up this opportunity now for Parliament to do both, but in particular to water down protection, because the second track of human rights protection will no longer be available. And that is what human rights have to do with Brexit.